Hello everyone, this is the updated easy to hard list. The boss is currently in Darkest Dungeon 2. We are including the Shambler, Shackles, and Leviathan, and Seething Sigh this time, so we have an additional 4 bosses compared to the original 3 I did. Thus, we're going to have 7 bosses instead of 3, which should make this list a little longer and more interesting, and I have made one change even from the original list, so this should be fairly different now. Let's go. Librarian comes in at number 7. Librarian's HP is still far too low, and the damage output of the Librarian doesn't really get insane until the first couple of positions, but often by then the low HP is decimated. Therefore, the Librarian, it has in the past killed a few individuals. The first time I fought, I think I lost somebody, or almost did, but like literally my first time interacting, didn't know what happened if you burned all the books. Second time I've lost somebody, it was just kind of bad RNG. It happens on occasion in Darkest Dungeon, but other than that, Librarian used to be my go-to for beating a boss and getting their trophy. I've now branched out into usually actually killing the Harvest Child, Leviathan, and Dreaming General more, as they are a harder boss fight. As I said, the HP, lack of damage, and the fact that you can even funnel some of his skills into one hero with Repose can even burst down that softer HP faster than normal. Also, DOT is very good against this guy, as he does actually have a lot of actions, thus he melts very quickly to DOT comps. Especially the Plague Doctor and Grave Robber can do some nice blight DOT on this guy. Number 6, we come to the new boss, the Leviathan. The Leviathan, I like the design. It actually has a decent chunk of HP sitting at 155, but doesn't feel like it does too terribly much damage, and the main hand gimmick, if you do have a couple of move resist, can be resisted decently well. It's still a lot harder than the Librarian, but I've had some pretty good runs against the Leviathan where I didn't really necessarily feel the full strength, as it does make you play a little different, but it's not the whole time, as a couple of the other bosses we're going to talk about, the hand only comes up what feels like every other turn. Therefore, you get to dump all of your damage into the Leviathan in one turn, maybe take care of the hand in 2, dump all your damage into the Leviathan, and at that point 150 HP really isn't that much with a couple of good DOT abilities. Because once again, DOT is the boss killer of many active actions, and that is what the Leviathan has. Excellent design, really cool. The missed chances and vulnerabilities are really good as well, but with a few items you can get rid of that. Thus, the Leviathan, a fun boss, but definitely not nearly the hardest in the game. Its biggest thing could probably do is maybe get like a 15-20 HP boost, and it should be relatively good then. Number 5, Harvest Child. The Harvest Child, I actually moved it down. I thought Harvest Child was the hardest, and then I realized you only kill the big meat sack that makes your people move forward, which is 50 HP, then the Harvest Child itself has 120, therefore it's about 170 HP you have to get through. The Harvest Child does a decent amount of action on its own, therefore some bleed builds work. If you have a blight skill chance, you can actually get some decent blights off on it, or you can get some vulnerability tokens in there and do some nice damage. The Harvest Child also, if you don't destroy both meat sacks, as I do in this video, I will get wrecked a little. You can actually funnel a lot of the attacks into people who are doing riposte and stuff, therefore its actual damage isn't that bad if it's only doing 1 maul of life and 1 other blight skill. You can actually reduce the damage, have your party stop being shuffled, it's a good time, and also what makes it a little easier is if you kill the Dreaming General and you get the boss trophy that doesn't make your party move, this boss becomes significantly easier as well. It can still do a bunch of damage, it can still stress your party out, and still be a high kill shot boss, as reducing your max HP, eating into the meat pies, can absolutely ruin your day. Dreaming General, number 4. Dreaming General, the more I fought it, the more I realized, I mean, it's still doable, but it's a hard boss. It has a lot of HP sitting at 205. The root system you do have to be aware about, and it's a chronic issue. You can't just chronically dump all of your damage into the Dreaming General and then try to worry about the roots. You have to constantly be calculating how many roots are on each person. Can they hit the back row? Are they gonna go first? Do they have an item that can hit everybody? There's a lot of strategy, a lot of skill, and a lot of things to consider when you come into the Dreaming General. He doesn't have a lot of actions, therefore DOT builds are actually not the greatest. Therefore, some damage increasing trinkets on your end, some strength tokens to make you do 50% more damage, and you can try for vulnerabilities are going to be your best way to taking down the Dreaming General quickly. But you're always going to have something like Abyssal, Plague Grenades, items, Iron Swan, maybe Pistol Shot to get rid of those roots. Then they add 2 each time, and then obviously if you hit the roots too many times, you're going to get crushed by a horrible ability. The Dreaming General can do massive damage and massive stress damage in the same fight, and I usually leave this boss worse for wear. I almost never leave the same as I came in. I'm almost always worse. Some of the other bosses we've mentioned, I either come out better, or I pretty much come out the same as I entered, which is a sign of a much easier boss. Shambler, number 3. The Shambler, it's only harder because of the conditions leading up to it. Usually if you have a lower torch, you've had relationships, negative banter, you've usually had more stress. Depending on where you're at on the road, you may not have a lot of HP, maybe you don't have the items equipped, maybe you got caught off guard. And that's why it makes the Shambler harder. Its actual HP is rather low, it doesn't get like any damage block tokens. Its resistances are fairly nice depending on the RNG you get for the enemy and what they get. In this scenario, I had all the resistances raised up, which made DOTs harder. Now, that only mattered on panic darts, but still it's a lot of damage I was missing per turn. As I said, the Shambler itself actually isn't terrible. You could probably blow it up in 2 to 3 rounds if you had your party correct. My comp kind of lacked a quick burst of physical damage. Sacrificial Stab could do it, but for the most part, outside of Poison Dart doing my DOT and the Sacrificial Stab, this party was a slightly slower cooker, and that is not what you need for the Shambler. Shambler, you need to blow it up, stop having the tentacles spawn, and they were just crushing me with crits. So due to the low torchlight you're obviously going to be dealing with, the stress, the negative banter, and the possibility of just not having everything you need on, this Shambler catches you off guard. Shackles, number 2. The Shackles hurt a lot, obviously. They're final boss, their act-ending boss. But even with that being said, there may be a scenario where an act-ending boss may be almost equally hard as other bosses, depending where you face them, but for the most part, all act bosses are probably going to be in the harder end. Obviously, they can block your healing, your stress healing, your range, and your melee. Well, depending on your party, that can be almost all your skills or all your damage, depending on a generic comp you went in, so your items need to be very good. You need to have utility items and utility skills ready for when you do get a turn where you may not be able to do what you want to do. You're going to get stunned, therefore you may need to be guarding people or bring in items to resist that. You may need to have items at the end for stun resist. There's a bunch of things that could go horribly wrong in this fight. There's decent damage between blinds, vulnerability tokens, and like I said, even if you do have an opportunity to heal, you may not even be able to heal. Therefore, this boss has high kill potential, has high party control, and absolutely makes you chronically bouncing forth between your items and skills to optimize your damage. Now, the good news about this boss is obviously the further you get, the weaker it gets. Usually once you get through the first 2 shackles, you're golden. I usually leave Fortitude left as the last one because at that point, my party is either healed enough or 1 shackle is not going to kill 4 heroes. But definitely keeping all 4 heroes alive and getting rid of the melee and ranged shackle are my favorite because obviously those are my damage skills. Then I go stress heal and then I go Fortitude. It's a very hard boss, well balanced, great fight though, and great design. Then we get to Seething Sigh at number 1. We're not going to talk about this boss's design too much, that's other videos I've done where I'm going to do. But currently it is the hardest boss in the game. Can you absolutely destroy it? Of course, any boss in this game you can pretty much absolutely destroy depending on your RNG and how things work out. So we're not going to say that since you can destroy this boss, it's easy, we're the easiest. But pretty much you need one of 2 comps from what I've seen so far. There may be new comps in the future. You either go super massive raw damage with vulnerability tokens, you can destroy it pretty quick, or you do really good DOT builds because once again the Seething Sigh has a lot of turns and you hurt it a lot. Now it does sit at the most HP on a single unit in the game, 350. The boss also collectively has the most HP in the game, sitting at I think around 700. Therefore, the massive amounts of HP, the turns it takes, the stress damage it does, and then obviously the lungs with deep breath can just crush your party for massive numbers. Now once again, 350 HP is actually not completely miserable to get through. You will need Repose to focus attacks in to get rid of the protection tokens it gets because it's 75%. If you can hit those with Repose, it'll greatly help as your melee damage dealers will not have to worry about getting through a protection. People like the Plague Doctor and Runaway can actually be decent at increasing the DOT per turn, and then obviously even the Jester is good for this fight. But the Seething Sigh definitely does the damage. Will probably make your party melt down at least once or twice per character, Thus, your relationships will be ruined near the end. It is doable, but is by far the hardest and will definitely make you think and structure skill for skill to the final boss, as well as the items you're going to bring along. Thank you for watching. Let me know what your order is. Now, once again, my order changed because I went from Harvest Child to Dreaming General. I used to have Dreaming General to Harvest Child. Definitely swapped those now. And the Leviathan, the new boss, is definitely not as easy as the Librarian, but a little bit easier after that. Thank you for watching.